You're listening to the Brain versus Me podcast, a show about the moments your brain gets ahead of you, usually before you're ready. Here's your host, Joshua Ericson.
I sat down to write this episode about ADHD and immediately alphabetized my spice rack, rewired a lamp, and spent 40 minutes researching the life cycle of jellyfish. But yeah, totally ready to focus. Hey everyone, I'm Joshua Ericson and welcome to another episode of Brain vs. Me. Today we're diving into ADHD, not the buzzword version, not the LOL I forgot my keys again version, the real version. The version where your brain is constantly flipping channels and none of them have good reception. Where productivity feels like juggling flaming swords and forgetting you were juggling. When you open a new tab and forget why, and suddenly it's 4 p.m. and you're deep in a conspiracy theory about why birds aren't real. ADHD isn't just forgetfulness. It's shame, it's panic, it's overcompensation, and emotional whiplash. Today, we're unpacking all of it, one chaotic spiral at a time. I didn't realize I had ADHD until I was well into adulthood. Not because it wasn't there. Oh, it was there. But because I had gotten so good at masking it from everybody and myself. I was the kid who always forgot his homework but got away with it because I could charm my way through class. I was the adult who realized deadlines with 5 minutes to go, spaced meetings, lost track of time, and then pulled off miracles at the last second to make it look intentional. I thought I was just bad at life or lucky, that I lacked discipline or willpower, that everyone else had some secret I just wasn't let in on. What I didn't know was that my brain wasn't broken, it was just wired differently. And no one ever taught me how to work with this wiring. Look, ADHD is frustrating because some days I can hyperfocus for 8 hours straight on something wildly specific, like organizing my garage or building a podcast studio from scratch. And the next day, I can't respond to a 2-sentence email without wanting to crawl into a hole. It's inconsistent, it's unpredictable, and it's exhausting in ways that are hard to explain. Not because I don't have the words, believe me, I have too many words, but because ADHD shows up in sneaky shape-shifting ways. It's not just a funny squirrel moment people joke about. It's the deep executive dysfunction, the guilt and shame from starting nothing or starting 18 things at once and finishing none of them. It's the emotional spiral when someone says, "You're too much," or "You're too loud," or "Why can't you just remember?" ADHD is a loud brain in a quiet world, and today we're going to talk about what that's really like. One of the most frustrating parts of ADHD is that it makes the easy stuff feel impossible, like starting an email, making a phone call, putting away a pair of socks that's been sitting on the floor for 6 days. You want to do it, you mean to do it, but there's this invisible wall between intention and action, and it doesn't move just because you're motivated or guilt-ridden enough. So you end up frozen, scrolling through your phone, flipping between tabs, standing in the middle of the kitchen trying to remember why you walked in there. And people on the outside think you're lazy, but you're not. You're just stuck. And when you do finally get something done, it takes everything out of you, so then you crash, or overcompensate, or start 5 new things in a burst of momentum you know won't last, but you chase it anyway because it feels so damn good to finally be in motion. Then there's the emotional side no one talks about, like the anxiety that comes from constantly forgetting things and disappointing people, or the shame spiral after you interrupt someone for the 3rd time in a conversation, or the identity crisis that creeps in when your brain betrays you mid-sentence and you lose your train of thought again. ADHD isn't cute or quirky. It's frustrating. It's isolating. And half the time, it feels like you're fighting yourself just to show up in the world the way you want to. But it's not hopeless. Once I started recognizing the patterns, naming them, understanding them, I could finally stop blaming myself. And that's what I want to explore today. Not how to fix ADHD, but how to live with it in a world that doesn't always make space for the way our brains work. All right, let me walk you through a classic ADHD productivity moment. It starts with a task, just one thing, simple, manageable. Send that email. Cool, easy. But then Wait, didn't I need to attach that file? Where is that file? Oh, it's on my desktop. But my desktop is a mess. I should really organize it. Wow, I have way too many screenshots. I don't even remember taking half of these. Oh, look, a picture of my dog as a puppy. Now I'm going to text it to my wife. Now we're going to talk about getting another dog. Now I'm Googling hyperallergenic small dogs that don't bark. And it's 45 minutes later, and I haven't sent the email. That's the spiral. The ADHD brain doesn't just chase distractions, it creates them. It's constantly looking for stimulation. And when a task feels boring or overwhelming or vaguely unstructured, your brain is like, okay, but what if we did literally anything else? And the worst part, you know it's happening while it's happening. You're watching your brain wander, screaming internally, just go back, just finish the thing. But your brain's already moved on, like a toddler with a flamethrower. Sometimes, to fight the spiral, I'll try productivity hacks, timers, apps, color-coded to-do lists. I once made a spreadsheet that planned my time down to the half hour, and then spent 4 hours perfecting the spreadsheet instead of actually doing any of the things on it. Because for ADHD brains, planning is dopamine. Doing is not. We love the idea of productivity, the illusion of control, but actually executing the task, that's where the wall hits. And then comes the guilt, because you spent 2 hours being busy and nothing is done. Now you're stressed, behind, frustrated with yourself. So you try to power through with shame as motivation, which works for like 10 minutes. Then you crash again. It's a loop of false starts and adrenaline-fueled recoveries. And people see the end result, the burst of energy, the last-minute miracle, and think, see, you just need pressure to perform. But pressure isn't sustainable. It's survival mode. And no one should have to live in a constant state of panic just to function. And here's the kicker. Sometimes the spiral doesn't even look chaotic from the outside. It might look like you're working. You've got tabs open, you're typing, you're moving around the house. But if you zoom in, you're doing little bits of everything and finishing none of it. Half an email draft, a load of laundry that made it into the washer but never got turned on, a half-eaten snack sitting on the counter, a browser with 36 ADHD productivity hacks you're not using. You're busy but stuck, moving but getting nowhere. And sometimes, this is the worst part, you actually get something done, like really done, productive, efficient, in the zone. So you think, okay, I've cracked the code, I'm fixed now. And then the next day, you try to replicate it and nothing. Total flatline. ADHD is like having a superpower you can't control. It shows up when it wants, disappears when you need it most. So you start second guessing yourself. Can I trust my own momentum? Is this real progress or just another lucky sprint? It messes with your confidence. It makes you afraid to start things because you don't know if this will be a good brain day or a sit in the shower and disassociate day. And that uncertainty wears on you slowly. That's the thing people don't always understand. Living with ADHD is not about being unable to do things. It's about never knowing when or how you'll be able to and blaming yourself for all the times you can't. That's the productivity spiral. It's not laziness. It's not procrastination. It's a nervous system that's sprinting in cycles while you try to steer it toward one clear direction. And until you understand that, you just keep blaming yourself for falling behind. Now let's talk about executive dysfunction. Here's what it feels like. You're standing at the edge of a pool. You want to jump in. You know how to swim. You've jumped in 1,000 times. But today, your legs won't move. You're just stuck. And no amount of logic or motivation changes that. You could be desperate to start. You could need to do the thing. But your brain has hit a wall, and there's no ladder over it. When I first heard the term executive dysfunction, I almost cried because I finally had a name for that stuck, frozen, shame-drenched feeling that followed me everywhere. The pile of dishes I couldn't touch, the phone call I couldn't make, the work I couldn't start, even though I wanted to, even though I knew there'd be consequences if I didn't. Before that, I just thought I was lazy or selfish or secretly a terrible person who just didn't care enough to get it together. Because that's what I'd been told by teachers, bosses, friends, even family. You just need to try harder. You're smart. You're just not applying yourself. Stop making excuses. But here's the truth. Executive dysfunction isn't a motivation problem. It's not a character flaw. It's a disconnection between what you want to do and what your brain will let you do. And the worst part, it's invisible. If you break your leg, people see the cast, they offer to help. But if your brain freezes every time you try to check your email, they just think you're flaky or disorganized or irresponsible. So you start hiding it. You fake productivity. You mask the overwhelm. You build elaborate systems and routines and workarounds just to appear functional. And when those break down, you break down too. Sometimes I'll sit in front of my computer for an hour, just staring, tabs open, cursor blinking. Every part of me wants to start, but I can't. It's like my brain is buffering and there's no restart button. And the shame that follows, it's heavy. You start wondering if this is just who you are. A person who lets people down, a person who doesn't finish things, a person who can't be trusted. And here's something I've learned the hard way. When you live with executive dysfunction long enough, it doesn't just mess with your day, it messes with your identity. You start filtering your entire sense of self through the things you can't do. You measure your worth by how productive you are, how often you get it together. And every time you fall short, it reinforces this quiet belief that maybe you're just not cut out for life the way other people are. You stop dreaming big because your brain can barely handle laundry. You stop planning ahead because follow through feels like a joke. You start playing small, not because you want to, but because it feels safer than disappointing yourself again. And that's what breaks my heart, because none of this is laziness. It's grief. Grief over the time you've lost, the confidence, the trust in yourself. But it's not the end of the story. Once you realize that your brain and not your character, you can finally stop blaming yourself. And that's where the real progress starts. But it's not who you are. It's how your brain processes tasks. And there are ways to work with it. Not to erase it or fix it, but to understand it. To reduce the shame. To find strategies that match your brain instead of punishing it. For me, that's looked like using body doubling to get started on tasks, breaking projects into absurdly small steps, lowering the bar intentionally so I could just start, and most importantly, learning to forgive myself when the wall wins, because it will win sometimes, but not always and not forever. That's what people don't always get. Executive dysfunction isn't about not wanting to do the thing, it's about feeling trapped while wanting to do the thing. And that disconnect, it can break your heart a little every single day. Now let's talk about hyperfocus. ADHD is often described as a lack of attention, but that's not quite right. It's not that we can't pay attention, it's that we can't regulate it. Sometimes I can't stay focused on a 30-second task. Other times, I look up and realize I've been laser focused on reorganizing my bookshelf for 6 hours and forgot to eat or blink. That's hyperfocus. It's like falling into a tunnel. Everything outside the task disappears. Time becomes meaningless. Your body, irrelevant. Your bladder, forgotten. Your loved ones, I swear I'll come say goodnight in just a sec. Wait, it's 2 a.m.? And it's deceptively satisfying. Hyperfocus is one of the few times my brain goes quiet. There's no background noise, no internal debate, no jumping thoughts, just full on immersion, which feels amazing until it doesn't. Because hyperfocus isn't always aimed at something useful. Sometimes it locks on to stuff that doesn't matter at all. One time I spent an entire day tweaking the formatting on a document I never sent. Another time I got obsessed with researching medieval bread ovens for reasons. And when you finally snap out of it, the world hits you all at once. You realize you're dehydrated, overstimulated, and now 4 things are overdue because you forgot they existed. It's like being trapped between two extremes. You either can't start anything or you start one thing and vanish into it. There's no middle gear. And this is where ADHD gets extra tricky because the outside world loves your hyperfocus and it sees the end result and says, wow, look what you can do when you apply yourself. And you're like, yeah, but at what cost? Because they didn't see the crash that followed, the headache, the missed meals, the emotional fallout. They didn't see the mountain of stuff you neglected while you were buried in that one hyperfocused task. It's hard to explain how out of body it can feel. You don't realize you're deep in it until it's too late. You miss appointments. You ignore texts. You forgot to eat. Literally forget. Not in a quirky way, in a my body never sent the hunger signal way. One time my wife found me still sitting in my office chair at 1 a.m., half zoned out, halfway through editing something for a project that had no deadline and no real urgency. She said, "Did you eat dinner?" I genuinely didn't know. I had to check the sink to see if there were dishes. That's the part no one talks about. Hyperfocus isn't just a productivity quirk, it's a dysregulation of attention. It steals your time and tricks you into thinking you're being efficient when really you're just absorbed. And the crash afterward, that can mess with you. Because once the tunnel closes, you're left facing everything you ignored, the tasks, the people, the messages, the reality, and sometimes the shame of, I did it again. I've learned to set timers now, to check in with my body, to put notes on my desk that say things like eat something or stand up. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. Because hyperfocus isn't a gift unless you know how to come back from it. Here's a fun thing they don't put on the ADHD pamphlet. You might cry if someone sounds mildly disappointed in you. Not because you're soft, not because you're overly dramatic, but because your nervous system is permanently set to, am I in trouble? That's rejection sensitivity. It's when even perceived criticism feels like a gut punch. When someone says, hey, we need to talk, and your brain immediately plays a highlight reel of every mistake you've ever made, or when your boss says, this could have been done a little faster, and your entire sense of worth crumples into a ball. It's not just emotional, it's physiological. Your heart rate spikes, your chest tightens, your brain short circuits. You can't focus, you can't respond, you're just spiraling. And the worst part is, you know it's an overreaction. You know the person isn't attacking you, but your brain can't tell the difference between that was a small error and you are a failure. So you over apologize, or go radio silent, or burn bridges preemptively because they're going to leave anyway. It shows up in relationships too. You misread a text, you sense a shift in tone. You hear a pause in someone's voice and think, they hate me now. You'll try to fix it immediately because the anxiety of not being okay with someone is unbearable. But your need for reassurance can become its own cycle. And people don't always understand why you need so much of it. Why a small moment feels like a catastrophe. Because for people with ADHD, emotional regulation is just as hard as time management. And let's be real. Unless you spent your life messing up little things, you start to expect rejection. You assume people are mad. You brace for it before it even happens. And that makes everything feel personal. Every note, every correction, every silence. It's exhausting because you're constantly reading the room, replaying conversations, wondering if you went too far, talked too much, said the wrong thing. And when rejection does happen, even tiny ones, it lands hard. You get ghosted. A friend cancels. Someone forgets to reply. Instead of, oh, they're probably busy, your brain says, they're done with you. That kind of sensitivity wears you down over time. It makes you question your value even when things are going well. You start anticipating pain, even in safe relationships. And that makes connection feel dangerous. Vulnerability makes risk feel like a strength. And here's the thing. This isn't weakness. It's your brain trying to protect you. It's learned that rejection hurts, so it built in warning systems. They're just a little overreactive. And once you understand that, You can start to gently challenge these reactions. You can slow down the spiral. You can learn to say, this feeling isn't a fact. And over time, it gets easier to believe. And that's what we're really talking about today. Not just the ADHD symptoms, but the emotional cost of living in a world that doesn't understand your brain and the work it takes to rebuild trust in yourself. To wrap this up, if you've ever sat in front of your laptop, willing yourself to do something simple and still couldn't, if you've hyper-focused through meals and time itself, if you've cried over a single email because your brain decided it meant you were unlovable, welcome to the club. ADHD isn't just a diagnosis. It's a lived experience, layered, confusing, and constantly evolving. It's the high of a hyper-focus win and the crash right after. It's the guilt spiral of forgetting something again, even when you really tried not to. It's the feeling of being too much and not enough at the exact same time. But most of all, it's not your fault. Your brain isn't broken. You don't need fixing. You just need tools, support, language for what's happening inside you, and maybe a little grace while you figure it out. Because you're not alone in this, not by a long shot. Thanks for listening to me on Brain vs. Me today. If this episode hit home, share it with someone who needs to feel less alone in their ADHD spiral, or just needs a good laugh about productivity shame. You can find all episodes, blog posts, and updates at brainvsme.com, or follow along on Twitter at @thebrainvsme. Next week, we're talking burnout, performative productivity, and the emotional fallout of trying to prove worth through work. It's called Work, Burnout, and Wondering if I should just vanish into the Wi-Fi. And as always, remember to be kind to yourself, because you deserve it.
Thanks for listening to the Brain vs. Me podcast. If you enjoyed this and want to keep up, follow or subscribe to the show. You can leave a comment, ask a question, or share the episode wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show or explore Joshua Ericson's books and writing, visit brainvsme.com.